I wrote down James Washington, right? I wrote down James Washington. I had James Washington in my notes. But as I was writing about James Washington, because I'm starting to take notes now because I'm a different content creator than I used to be. I'm starting to take notes now. As I was writing about James Washington, I was so compelled to talk about why people keep hating on Michael Gallup, right? And I can get a lot of James Washington talk from that, of course, because, James is going to be Gallup till Gallup gets back and then boom, boom, boom. But it made me think about what we're going to be asking of James Washington. And then it made me think about Gallup as a whole, right? Because I feel like Cowboy fans, when it's all good, it's all good. But when it's bad, it's bad. You know what I mean? So when we have a Cooper, a CD, and a Gallup, oh snap, we got 3 number 1 receivers. 3 of them. Oh, we lose Cooper, all of a sudden, CD trash, and we don't know what we're going to get from Gallup. You understand? Just that sky is falling mentality that we get from Cowboy fans. But this is what I did, Will Steele. I looked up some numbers. And I went to 2019. And why 2019 was important to me, because it was pre-CeeDee Lamb, right? So Gallup, just as a number 2 guy, just as a pure number 2 guy, not as a, third option because Lamb and Cooper over here, but just as a pure number 2 guy. And I forgot this, Will Steele. Yeah. In 2019, Gallup had 66 catches, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And it seems like once we quietly, right. And it seems like once we added CeeDee Lamb, of course, it took away from Gallup. That's natural, right? That's clear. That's natural. If Cooper's going to be a guy and we super want to get Lamb involved, Lamb was more involved than Cooper was, right? And Gallup would just end up being a guy to where, okay, we'll get big plays from him sometimes. Oh, well, Gallup will be the guy that'll be quiet for the most part, but he'll catch a couple deep balls down the sideline and we'll just get excited. But when we were using Gallup as a true number 2 guy, 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns is nothing to sneeze at, Will Steele. You understand? So if we can get back in this place to where, all right, Gallup, you're our number 2 receiver. We're going to look at you not only as number 2 receiver, but number 2 option. I don't see a world where Gallup can't continue to be that guy for you. Now, Gallup's going to miss a couple games. He's going to be out. He's going to be getting his feet back under him from ACL injury. But we're not talking about Gallup trying to get 1,100 yards again. We just want Gallup to be the dude that was getting 1,100 yards. And if that happens in, November, December, January, February, then fine. Long as I get you before the season's over with, then cool. That made me do this, Will Steele. Cowboy fans love Cedrick Wilson. I do too. Cedrick Wilson was a fun player, but there seems to be this thing in Cowboy Nation where we hate our good players. Byron Jones. And look, when I say we, I don't mean like me and Will and the people in this chat box that make sense, but them, where they hate the good players like Byron Jones. They hate D-Law. They'll hate somebody like Zeke. You know what I mean? They hate whatever, like players that play. They hate Dak. But they push for Rico Gathers for some reason. They push for Gus Johnson.
Noah Brown.
Andy Jones. Who you say?
Noah Brown.
Like they push for those guys. You know what I mean? Oh, Voch, what's the kid from Ole Miss this year? Drummond.
Something Drummond. Yeah.
I don't even know his name because I ain't look him up because I refuse.
I forget his first
name. Voch, he gonna make the team. Marquise Bell, right? I don't know what it is about taking these guys that aren't starters and just propping them up. When we lost Cedrick Wilson and he went to Miami, there's a portion of Cowboy Nation that would have you thinking that Cedrick Wilson was a make or break guy for us. Cedrick Wilson had 45 catches for 602 yards and 6 touchdowns. And I think all that is a product of this offense and Dak Prescott getting you the football. That's what I think it is. I like Cedrick Wilson, but I like him in the context of this offense. So when I take a look at James Washington, and, not in the, not September, right? But let's just say in November, right? Gallup gets his feet back under him. He's that guy. Lamb is having this fantastic year as the number 1 dude. He's that guy. The only thing we got to replace is Cedrick Wilson's 602 yards. You understand what I'm saying? His 45 catches for 602 yards and 6 touchdowns. I've already done the film session on James Washington. I think James Washington can get that easily. And I say that because James Washington got you that in a bad year with Mason Rudolph and a whack Ben Roethlisberger. Go back to 2019 when Ben Roethlisberger was good. James Washington was good. So now you put him in this offense where everybody seems to thrive, even Dalton Schultz. Put James Washington in this offense with our quarterback, with our system, and let that dude get more than 602 yards for you. But y'all not going to give him credit, though, because he's James Washington. Y'all not familiar with James Washington. He didn't grow up with us, boom, boom, boom. Y'all going to say whatever you want to say about James Washington. That dude could easily get 602 yards because we've seen him do it, even in a down year. Put him in a better offense. And then we just got Jalen Tolbert floating around. But we're not talking about Jalen Tolbert. We're talking about James Washington. So when we get to training camp, yeah, he was in a walking boot, but that was a tendonitis or something. Tendonitis is something that you can play with. But, hey, if we want to be precautionary, put him in a boot, put some ice on it, let somebody rub on it a little bit, throw some dirt, whatever you want to do to James Washington's tendonitis or whatever, fine, let him do that. But when camp comes around, I would love to see him match up with Anthony Brown, who's a speedy guy. I would love to see him match up with Boss Man Fat, who's an athletic dude, a little bigger than Anthony Brown, thick-wise or whatever. I want to see what he looks like versus Jordan Lewis in the slot. I want to see him versus Trey Diggs. I want to see what all this looks like. You know what I'm saying? When CD goes into the slot and James Washington lines up at the Z or something like that, I want to see what that looks like. Because I have confidence that James Washington, production-wise, can replace what Cedrick Wilson gave you. And if you ain't got that level of confidence in James Washington, I just implore you to just go watch 2019 James Washington film when his offense was good. Even if you watch the film where James Washington was bad, he can get you 602 yards. Will, did you have something on that?
You go watch this film. This is from
look at the film on the goddamn screen.
2021.
Look at the screen.
I mean, listen, James Washington, if we're keeping it a bean, from a talent wide receiver standpoint, is better than Cedrick Wilson. From a wide receiver standpoint, the pedigree coming out of college, where he was drafted, and he had a better year in a sense from a yardage total wise. Career year than Cedrick Wilson's career year. Now, Ced had the opportunity to play around guys that he played around and the quarterback that he played with. But even when James Washington got his role kind of came down that totem pole a little bit with guys like Claypool that came in, right? Sure. Juju was still there. Deontay Johnson started to come up. Even with all that said, and Noodle Arm Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph, the last 2 years where he wasn't the guy, he still was second on the team in yards per reception. Second. And when you go look at his ADOT, the average distance of his targets, it decreased every single year because you had Ben Roethlisberger throwing in the rock. So now you got... I'm sorry.
Well, his what per what now? What you said that was?
I believe it's average distance of target. If I'm not mistaken.
My dumb ass. Look, Will, I'm up here Googling what's his regular yards and catches. You up here talking about the ADOTs. Go ahead.
That's because I already did a whole thing on James. So I'm right with you. When you go and watch the tape, tell me what the only thing he can't do. I'll say this. That Ced was a very good gadget player. So those kind of reverses going into passes, I don't know that James is going to be doing that. So that's what you'll miss from Ced. And he can return some punts. Not like he was good. He just literally was back there. But from a pure receiving standpoint, I'd take James Washington's talent over Ced. And that's not knocking Ced, but these are the two guys we're comparing right now. So that's kind of where I'm at with it from a James Washington talent standpoint.
And I don't want y'all to look at Voch like, Voch being a homer, man. Voch up here just boom, boom. I just think that's just facts. It ain't like I'm saying that James Washington going to come out and tear the league up and be a Pro Bowl and be our wide receiver one. We're going to have two wide receiver ones, James and CD. That ain't what I'm saying. I'm saying is Cedrick Wilson gave you 602 yards. If James Washington by himself gives you 602 yards, that replaces that. That replaces the production. Now they're going to be used they're going to be used differently, of course. When we go jet sweeps, I mean that's probably going to be CD, that's probably going to be Tony. But in this system, he's probably going to give you better than that, just pure as a receiver, than trying to give him overall yards or whatever. So I'm super looking forward to James Washington and what he's doing. Kyle in the chat box says, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, read Kyle's.
Kyle in the chat box says ADOT is a pretty common used term, to be honest. Voch ain't common term number guy. I'm not analytic.
If you nerdy analytic guy, but regular stats, it's not common to regular folk that's just looking for receptions, yards, touchdowns, average yards per reception. That's regular stats. But once you get into the analytics, that becomes very normal. But my question was,
Yes, sir.
Where do you want to see him at, Voch? Because I've been back and forth with this. I think I know where I settled at, where I want to see him. But where do you want to see him, outside or in the slot?
I want to see him everywhere. I think if we just get caught up in one look, then it'll make us predictable. And I think you can move him everywhere because we're going to move Lamb everywhere. You know what I'm saying? So we can always say, hey, we got to get Lamb involved. Some games, Lamb's going to be doing better from the outside. Sometimes we're going to have to move Lamb inside. There were some times we saw Lamb in the backfield last year. I was watching the film. Lamb was lined up at running back.
Phase my question then, because I don't. Nobody's going to play 100% of snaps in one spot. That's not what I'm asking for. Where do you want to see him at primarily?
Outside.
So then
outside, more than likely.
So you're a Lamb slot guy.
Sure, I'm that guy. Like if I had to, base like majority wise, I think our best, and let's just say like in November or something when Gallup is healthy, right? Yeah. Our best lineup is CeeDee Lamb lined up inside. And then if we got to switch guys around, then cool. It just depends on, do you feel comfortable with your number one receiver playing slot? Y'all love the Rams. Cooper Kupp gets busy in there, and he gets a lot of his yards in there and a lot of his touchdowns and a lot of his production in there. But what makes Cooper Kupp the number one dude is the targets. So as long as Lamb getting his targets, you can put James Washington wherever you want to put him.
Yeah, see, I kind of want to see him in a slot because it just reminds me of when Randall Cobb was there, and when you look at slot, hell, even CeeDee Lamb. When Dak has a primary slot receiver, that slot receiver tends to do very well. Said Wilson went off, Lamb went off, Cobb went off. Beasley had a career year with Dak when he was primarily in the slot. So I would like to see him focus more there, but this scheme, these guys are going to be everywhere. Lamb, you don't want to box Lamb. Yeah, move him in the slot too. But it'd be nice because when Dak has that slot guy he can trust, the good things happen with that slot receiver. It's just that, so now I'm going to do the Voch game. What's better, Lamb in the slot or Lamb in the slot versus Washington on the boundary versus Lamb on the boundary and Washington in the slot? That makes sense.
And for that reason that you said, that Dak's favorite dude is in the slot, because our biggest gripe last year.
Not favorite. It's just they're productive, is what I'm saying.
They're production-wise, yeah. Sure. Our biggest gripe with it was, Lamb is here. Why can't we get Lamb the ball? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So if Dak just finds a dude in the slot by way of play design or by way of first read, second read slot guy, let's just put the best dude in the slot. Like if the slot dude is getting the most targets and the most natural.
They're not. I don't want to confuse you. They're not being the most targeted or most receptions, yards, or touchdowns. They're just really productive, is what I'm getting at. Productive. And if you got a good one in there, and one that's focused on that, I think it helps because I think that's one of those positions where you got to have that chemistry, right? And Dak and Lamb have it. So if it's Lamb, it's Lamb. I just didn't worry. Do I really trust Tolbert and Washington as my boundary guys? Two totally new receivers for a little bit because Gallup will be back. Do I trust them? I don't know just yet. But I digress. I just was curious where you wanted to put him at.
But to that point, like if I could just do the inverse, we know what CeeDee Lamb looks like outside. So if we want to bump James up a little bit, okay, cool. We know what Lamb looks like out there. We know how to get Lamb the ball out there. We know he's one of them dudes out there. Let's just put James in the slot to make it easy for him. Because we know what Gallup looks like on the left. Like Gallup on the left has always been who he is. Big muscle, deep ball guy, yak dude. Let him be that. Guy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So sure, let James Washington play the slot and that'll elevate him a little bit. And then there's the question of what do you do with Tolbert? So let me ask you this, Will Steele. Would you rather go with the veteran in there, or do you want to throw Tolbert in the fire to let him get better, or do you want to rotate both those dudes?
So with Tolbert, I want him to start off on the boundary. Obviously, he's going to play in the slot sometimes too. Now, if they decide to throw him in there in the fire, then let him focus on that in a way. But I kind of want to see him as a boundary guy because I think he can be a quasi Michael Gallup replacement early on if he focuses on that, meaning a deep threat, but he got a little bit more speed.
What I'm saying is Tolbert's gonna play in September. There's no question about that. But when Gallup comes back, then what happens? When Gallup comes back, we got to move guys around. Do we sit the rookie? You know what I'm saying, or do we just roll with the veteran? Is what I'm saying.
That's a question that I think I proposed that to you weeks ago, but that's something we got to see because it all depends who's playing better. All right. If Washington is eating, I can't sit him. But if Tober is eating too, hell, that's good for Dallas. So now you just kind of got a good problem to have on your hands.
Sure. And, then like Noah Brown had like 30 catches last year or something like that. So if, if Tober got to come off the bench and just get his catches and get in where he fits in or whatever, then fine. I'm done throwing the ball with Noah Brown just for clarity or whatever.
Let me clarify this, Alex. It's not that he doesn't like – he says, why doesn't Dak like throwing the ball outside more? Alex, Gallup had 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns outside. Amari Cooper, was eating outside. That's not what we're really talking about here. It's just that the slot position in today's game is important, and it's important in Dallas. And just my brief research, it seems like when there's a primary slot, that slot receiver is very productive. That's
sure. We're not just saying if a guy is good there, because we was close to having 3,000-yard receivers. You know what I'm saying? So it's not about. You know what I'm saying? With a tight end that was at 800 yards. We're not talking about who's good. We're just trying to bring a little bit of nuance to the discussion. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So we go, okay, it's more than just who's good. It's who's going to be the best here and the best there. We're just getting meticulous, man. We're just getting meticulous. That's all.